Hello, and welcome to the Terry Talks Nutrition Educational Webinar Series. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's speaker is Dr. Adrian Lopresti. Dr. Lopresti is a clinical psychologist in private practice. He's also the managing director at Clinical Research Australia and an adjunct senior lecturer at Murdoch University in Western Australia. He has 20 years of clinical experience in working with children and adults experiencing a wide range of mental health conditions. He also has experience in several psychological therapies and has received extensive training in nutritional and lifestyle treatments for mental health disorder. Dr. Lopresti regularly publishes in peer-reviewed and high-impact journals on the effects of diet, nutraceuticals, sleep, and exercise for the treatment and prevention of depression, anxiety, attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity disorder, and bipolar disorder. He's completed several clinical trials investigating the effects of natural ingredients for the treatment of anxiety, stress, depression, cognition, digestive health, and overall well-being in children and adults. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Lopresti is the founder of Personalized Integrative Therapy, an evidence-based integrative treatment for depression and anxiety. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming our guest today, Dr. Adrian Lopresti. Welcome, Dr. Lopresti.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for having me. Okay, so today I wanted to talk a bit about COVID-19 and its mental health impact that it's having on all of us, and just some strategies that we can implement to help manage both our physical and mental health during this time. So I'll just go through just a bit of background first. So what we're seeing is obviously there's a lot of the media is talking about the physical implications of COVID-19. But the reality is that it's also having significant mental health impacts on us. And this is just a recent paper that I've seen that just talks about that, almost a quarter of us experiencing anxiety and depression. And I suspect that the rates are significantly higher than that. This is just preliminary research that indicates this. But the reality is that the fear and the anxiety associated with COVID-19 and the social isolation that's resulting from it is having a significant impact on our mental well-being. And for a lot of people, this is having a negative effect on their sleep. For some people, unfortunately, there's increased kind of suicidal ideation that's occurring too. And unfortunately, things like disturbed sleep and even changes in dietary patterns and unhelpful coping patterns can have it can exacerbate things even further. So in the end, these coping tools or consequences associated with isolation worsens our mental health. And unfortunately, it also worsens our immunity. So we need to really consider things that we can do to improve our mental well-being. Obviously, the people who are more likely to be vulnerable to increasing exacerbation in their mental health are those with pre-existing depression and anxiety. Obviously, they're going to be more vulnerable to stresses. There's our frontline workers who may be exposed to people who are unwell and the stresses associated with working in hospitals and so forth. They're also likely to be impacted. And obviously those people who have lost their job, who are experiencing significant financial strain, and the worries and concerns associated with that will have an adverse impact also. The other is those who are at risk. We know that those people with comorbid medical conditions such as heart disease and respiratory conditions are at greater risk of I suppose, experiencing adverse effects associated with COVID-19. So there's going to be increased anxiety for them. And the other thing that people are often not talking about is that the social isolation or the lockdown that is often occurring in many countries is unfortunately meaning that they're spending time at home. And if the home environment was already an unhappy one, or they were exposed to violent situations, this will just further exacerbate their difficulties. So these are things that we need to consider in relation to the mental health side of things. So some of the worries that people are going to be experiencing as a result of COVID-19 are the fears of contracting the disease. So obviously, worrying about contracting the disease, and there's this greater sensitivity to the symptoms. So previously, this time last year, if somebody had a sore throat, they would have just thought, oh, okay, it's a sore throat, and that would have been the end of it. And they might have been engaged in, taking some throat lozenges or increase their vitamin C content, and that would have been it. But now, because of the increased media that's occurring around COVID-19, now a sore throat is, for some people, is considered a serious condition. And as a result of that, they may go to the hospital and become increasingly anxious about potentially having contracted COVID-19. So now we're seeing a greater hypersensitivity to these symptoms that previously they may not have really kind of reacted to too much. There's also the fear of loved ones contracting the disease. So if we have loved ones who are elderly or who have comorbid medical conditions, that's going to increase our worry too for them. There's obviously the worry about contracting the disease. The worry about the uncertainty of the future, work, schooling, finances. This is uncertain times, and for most of us, we haven't experienced these times. And so this will then also increase our anxiety and then also have an adverse impact on our mood. There's also worries about the virus getting worse, the world changing forever, what impact this is going to have, when is life going to return back to normal, will it ever return back to normal, are we going to experience a second wave of an exacerbation in the rates of COVID-19? All these are occurring in people's thoughts and worries. There's obviously the issues around social distancing, and we know as humans we need to be around people. It's important for our mental health to be around people. And if we're spending our time at home, if we were previously socialising, going to restaurants and spending time with others, going to parties and things like that, now we're no longer able to do that. And that can have an adverse effect on our mental health. And obviously the issues around the loss of independence, the government restrictions that are in place can also have a negative impact on our mental well-being. So here's just some of the worries that many people may be experiencing at this time during COVID-19. So what happens during this time? So unfortunately, what's going to occur during times of stress is our fight or flight response is triggered. So when there's a threat, whether it be real or imagined, and so keep in mind that while there is certainly real threats associated with COVID-19, there's also the thoughts and the worries that are associated with it. And our body doesn't really care whether the thought is real or the thoughts or the reality, whether it's real or whether it's imagined. Our body's going to react in the same way. So if there is a lion in our room, we're going to obviously react. If we think there is a lion in our room, our body is also going to react, and it's going to trigger a fight or flight response. And this triggers areas in our brain to release then our stress hormones known as cortisol, noradrenaline or adrenaline, and this puts us into the fight or flight response. And things that occur increases in heart rate, there's bladder relaxation, people need to go to the toilet more often, there's tunnel vision, there's shaking, dilated pupils, flushed face, dry mouth. These are just some of the symptoms that occur as a result of the fight or flight response. And these prepare us to either fight or flight. So this graphic here just depicts some of the things that occur when we're in this fight or flight response. So there's increasing sensitivity to other stresses. So we're now hyper-vigilant to danger, to illness, to stresses or around finances, to work factors, to family stresses, to other life stresses. There's an increasing sensitivity. So rather than us, if we were in a calm state, we would respond moderately. But now, we're already in a hyper-vigilant, stressed fight or flight response, we're going to respond far more reactively to these situations. So our baseline is now at a higher level, and we're going to then respond. This can then result in increasing mental health problems. We know that stress will increase our likelihood of experiencing anxiety and anxiety disorder, such as generalized anxiety disorder or various other disorders that are occurring. And unfortunately, increasing stress will also increase our likelihood of experiencing things like depression, bipolar disorder, and those types of conditions are likely to occur. Our productivity is often reduced. While our fight or flight response is actually an adaptive response, it should only be turned on for brief periods and then turned off. But if there's constant media messages going on talking about the danger associated with COVID-19, and we're continually watching the media, watching the news, our response is never going to settle. And as a result, this can have a negative impact on our memory, on our concentration, and then ultimately result in an adverse effect on our productivity. For some people, they're going to use alcohol and other drugs to cope. And unfortunately, this will then exacerbate our mental health response and the mental health condition and increase stress levels, or have an adverse effect on our sleep. And so this then compounds the problems even further. For others, they may be excessively preoccupied on COVID-19. They're watching the news, they're watching the media, they're listening to the radio. And unfortunately, it's constant. So I know that certainly in Australia, the media messages are constant. You can't escape it. The only way to really turn to not hear about the media, about the COVID-19, is to turn off the TV or turn off the radio. And I suspect it's the same throughout the world. And there's really we are becoming more and more aware that the fact that the mental health has a relationship on our physical health, and the mind and body interaction, they affect each other. And when our body is experiencing constant stress, it then will lower our immune response, which is certainly what we don't want during these times. So these are just some of the things that we certainly need to consider. Okay, not sure where the next slide is. So because of this hypersensitive stress response that we're experiencing, and the fact that for many of us we're in this hypervigilant state, it's extremely important that we do things to turn down our fight or flight response. We need to do things to turn down our fear centers in our brain, because they're now triggered excessively. We need to do things to lower levels of cortisol and noradrenaline and adrenaline, because these should only be elevated for short periods. And I'm going to go through some of the things that we can do to turn off or turn down our stress response. So the first things I kind of recommend with regards to during this time is really think about how much time you're spending watching the news, and because this is going to keep us in a hypervigilant state. So often I'll recommend having corona-free news days. So these are days where you don't watch any news about corona or the COVID-19. And if you're going to find this difficult, then just set a limit. Say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to watch the news for half an hour in the morning, and that's all I'm going to do. So it's really important that you don't overdose on the news. And many people will say, well, I'm just educating myself about COVID-19, and this is really important. But one of the things I want you to really ask yourself is, am I engaging in healthy problem solving, or is it becoming obsessive? Am I ruminating, obsessively thinking about COVID-19? Healthy problem solving involves spending an allocated amount of time and coming up with a solution. But unfortunately, for many of us, there isn't a solution at the moment. So this results in obsessing about COVID-19. So have a think about if you're spending too much time watching the news, either having corona-free news days or setting limits on the amount of time you're watching the news. The other thing is, obviously, we can't escape it through our social media. So we're being exposed through our social media. So again, do we need to put limits on our interaction and our time, the amount of time we spend on social media? Do we need to turn off the radio? Do we need to turn off the TV? I know for myself, I've now turned off the radio because it's just constant. I don't want to start my day driving to work listening to more and more news about COVID-19. So I turned off the radio and instead I'm listening to music on my way to work. Do you need to unfollow negative people or alarmists? Those people consistently posting or spreading messages about COVID-19. Is this triggering your fight or flight response? And again, do you need to kind of have a review and think about the people you're listening to, the news you're reading? Should you limit the amount of time you again spend on these? The other thing too is, do you need to establish rules about conversations about coronavirus or not talking about coronavirus? If we go back 12 months ago, we weren't having conversations about coronavirus. We're talking about other things. Do we need to kind of revisit that? Do we need to let our family, our loved ones, and family members know, hey, maybe today we shouldn't discuss this. Maybe we should put a limit on the amount of conversation we have on this. Maybe let's talk about something else. We need to refocus. We need to move our focus away from COVID-19 that can often bring us down and move our focus towards things that are more uplifting, that are more engaging rather than COVID-19. You also need to put limits around who you spend time with. The alarmists, the people who are constantly preoccupied with COVID-19, should you be around more uplifting people? So do you need to be a little bit more selective in who you spend time with, particularly if you're struggling with anxiety and low mood? I would really encourage you to just kind of revisit who you're spending time with and maybe put limits on those people who feed your anxiety and instead spend more time with those who feed more uplifting, positive messages. And it's really important for you to become contagiously positive. We feed off others and others will feed off us. So how can you become more contagiously positive? How can you start conversations that are more uplifting and more positive rather than those that can kind of bring people down? So these are just some suggestions during these times, particularly if you're struggling with anxiety and low mood. In terms of building your own mental and physical resiliency, there's several strategies that we need to really think about. And rather than just rely on one thing, it's an integrative approach. It's a holistic approach. So here are some ideas that I'd like you to kind of consider to help build your mental and physical resilience. So firstly, your routines. Now, for many of you who may have been going to work on a daily basis and now are no longer doing that, you're either not working or you're working from home, have a think about your schedule. What does your schedule look like? Do you have a daily routine, or is it changing from day to day? Is your wake and bedtimes the same, or is it constantly changing? One night you're going to bed at 10 p.m. and another night you're going to bed at 1 a.m.? It's really important for us to have consistent routines. We need to wake up and go to bed at the same time. We need to have some pretty good consistency around our schedule, which we previously would have had. In terms of meal times, again, are you establishing good, healthy routines around meal times? And unfortunately, being at home, you have your pantry at home and you have ongoing access to food. So do you need to also put restrictions and develop more routines around what you eat and when you eat? The other thing is in terms of your regular pleasurable activities. So if you're focused on negative things, it's going to trigger that fight or flight response. But if you're focused on pleasurable things, it's going to turn down our fight or flight response. So what is pleasurable for you? I've just listed some suggestions here. It really depends on you and what your preferences are. Do you listen to music? Do you sing? These things are really important. These can lower our cortisol, our stress hormones. Do you watch good videos and entertaining videos and things and YouTube clips that make you laugh? Are you reading and important reading? Are you reading positive information? Are you rather than the negative things? Even if you read the Bible, which verses are you reading? Are you reading those that are doom and gloom ones, or are you reading more those positive messages? What hobbies are you engaging in? Can you start? If you've got more time now, if you're spending more time at home, Are there hobbies or interests or things that you can do? Podcasts, and these are all things that we need to consider that would be really good for us in terms of lowering our stress response. Should you learn a new skill? Engage in education. Should you learn that language that you've always wanted to learn but you've never had the opportunity to do? Do you complete a course? Again, do you learn a new hobby? Do you learn a new skill? From a dietary perspective, we know that our diets can have a significant effect on our mental and physical health. Previously, it was believed that diet had an impact on our physical health, but now we're seeing that it has a significant effect on our mental well-being. So what's your diet look like? Are there changes that you can make with your diet to help, again, improve your physical and mental health? And this involves increasing more plant-based foods, meaning minimizing takeaway foods and junk foods, minimizing alcohol, and cooking or eating real food, ones that don't come in a box. So have a think about changes that you can make in relation to your diet. You don't have to be perfect in all of these. I often will suggest to a lot of my patients, it's making small changes in several different areas that are going to result in dramatic improvements. If you can improve your routines by 10%, if you can increase your pleasurable activities, your engagement in pleasurable activities by half an hour a day, if you can spend a little bit more time learning a skill, if you can increase your plant-based foods by 10-20%, all of these, if you add them together, can result in a significant impact on our mental health. In terms of your sleep, we know that sleep is extremely important for both our mental and physical well-being. So what's your sleep like? Are you respecting sleep? Are you giving it the respect that it deserves? Are you establishing good, healthy sleep hygiene routines? And so this means, this means going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, limiting your caffeine intake, limiting exposure to light in the evening, so not spending too much time on your phone, making sure the lights are turned down in the evening so your body starts preparing for sleep. Those are not eating too much, a large meal before bed, and there's several other things that you can do. So if you're struggling with sleep, just type on Google sleep hygiene, good sleep hygiene routines, and there'll be a whole bunch of different suggestions that you can get about sleep hygiene. And here I've kind of listed also identify, treat sleep disruptors. So what are those behaviors or factors that might be impacting on your sleep? And for example, could be coffee. So coffee could be disrupting your sleep. So do you need to minimize that? From a stress reduction point of view, what are things that you can do to reduce stress? Soothing activities, relaxation practices that you can engage in, meditation, prayer. These are things that you may need to consider. Should you learn? If you haven't learned relaxation, a lot of people will say, for example, when it comes to relaxation or meditation, that they can't do it. But they're actually called skills, relaxation and meditation skills, which means you must learn them. They take practice. And if you can't do them, that means you don't have the skill and then therefore requires practice. Caring for others. If we're caring for others, there's some interesting research that shows that if you care for others, it has a significant positive impact on our mental health. But there's also research that actually shows that it improves your immune response. So what are you doing for others? How are you caring for others? Are you checking in on others? They're things that, again, can be really important. Now, this one here, spending time in nature, can often be difficult for many cities and many countries at the moment because of the restrictions that are out there. But certainly, if possible, are you able to spend time in nature, spend time outdoors where possible? In terms of sunlight, are you getting sunlight in the morning? Are you sitting on the balcony getting sunlight? Are you having breakfast in your backyard in the morning? Because we really want to optimize sunlight exposure in the evening. That will help improve our circadian rhythm of our different hormones. It also increases our vitamin D, which also has a positive impact on both our mental health and our immune response. So think about spending what you can do to increase your exposure to light and to nature. Socializing is obviously, where possible, interact with others. Social isolation increases inflammation. It lowers our immune response. It increases morbidity and mortality risk. So this is one of the major concerns associated with the restrictions during this time. So what can you do to increase your social interaction? If it's in person, great, if you can do that. Otherwise, are you interacting online and those types of things? And again, as I've mentioned earlier, choosing uplifting people. Be careful who you spend time with. This is an opportunity for also you to reprioritize your life goals. Reflect on your life. What are the areas in your life that you need changing? There now changes and things that we can do to help improve our life in general. What can you do and for those people working at home, this is really important. I think setting up a home and office properly, taking breaks, interacting with others, getting sunlight, managing the kids. What does your office look like? Have you put some pictures up? Have you got some nice soothing music? Have you got nice soothing smells that are going through your room to help just make it more vibrant? And then finally, there's supplements. There's supplements that I'll go through that can help reduce stress, lower mood, improve mood, help with mood and mental and feelings of sadness. And there's obviously supplements that will improve immunity and general well-being, which I'll go through in more detail. So when it comes to stress, anxiety, here are the supplements that there's others out there, but here's the ones I recommend. So things like magnesium is really important for stress. B vitamins. There's some research around lavender that can have a stress-lowering effect. And there's also a range of herbs known as adaptogens. And these adaptogens help modulate our stress response. And they can also increase energy and vigor, which can be really positive for many people. So things like ashwagandha and ginseng are really important adaptogens that can help us during times of stress. The thing I just want to highlight when it comes to adaptogens is that qualities are really important. So make sure you choose an extract of ashwagandha or ginseng that has been clinically trialed, because unfortunately, there are low quality extracts out there. The other one I wanted to talk a bit about is echinacea. Now, echinacea is usually associated with our immune response, but interestingly, there is research around the particular extract that's indicated here that shows there's been two clinical trials that have indicated that this particular extract of echinacea can help lower anxiety. And it seems to do that by binding to the cannabinoid CB1 receptor. And this is a receptor that's implicated in mental health. So if you can kind of influence this receptor, it has an anti-anxiety or stress relieving effect. And there's been two clinical trials completed on this particular extract that has indicated that it improves, that can lower levels of stress and anxiety. And in actual fact, I'm also conducting a trial at the moment, quite a large trial using this extract for stress and anxiety. But there's already been two clinical trials, and hopefully we'll have the results of the one I'm conducting by the end of this year. So in the trials that were conducted, it reduced stress and anxiety in adults with high stress. And the great thing is that it resulted in quite rapid improvements in state anxiety. And what we mean by state anxiety is how you feel right now. And when people were asked about how they feel right now, this extract had a significant positive effect on it. And the interesting thing too, the most exciting thing is that when people went off it for 3 weeks, their state anxiety continued to be lower compared to the placebo over a 3-week washout period. So this is another option for people to consider. If you're experiencing low mood, depression, sadness, then the ones I like are saffron. I've conducted several clinical trials looking at saffron to help improve mood, and there's been more than 20 clinical trials now looking at saffron as an antidepressant. And the research consistently indicates that saffron is a great antidepressant for people experiencing low to moderate depressive symptoms. The other one I've also conducted trials on is curcumin. And curcumin is derived from the spice turmeric. And again, curcumin has also been shown in clinical trials and through a couple of trials that I've completed to have antidepressant effects. The other one that many people will be aware of is St. John's wort. And that's another option that people consider. The only thing we need to be careful about with St. John's wort is that it can interact with many medications. And the other one I'll recommend, and this one really is omega-3 fatty acids. You could really put it into all the categories. I've just placed it in the depression sadness, but you certainly could put it in all the categories that I'm going to go through now. But certainly omega-3 fatty acids has a really positive effect on our inflammation. It helps restore some of our neurotransmitters that are important for mood. And so certainly I recommend omega-3 fatty acids. And there's a particular extract, omega-3 fatty acid complex extract from salmon that is really interesting and for people to consider. It provides omega-3s from salmon, but it's not actually an oil. It contains a natural EPA-DHA ratio, which is bioidentical to what is in the body. And it's a phospholipid base, so it's bound to kind of phospholipid to help increase the absorption. And the problem with fish oil or standard fish oil is the bioavailability or the absorption of it. And this ingredient here has been shown to be up to 50 times better absorbed than normal fish oil. It also, because it's also bound to phospholipid base with phospholipid, the phospholipids also have anti-inflammatory effects. They're good for blood lipid metabolism, and they can also support neurological function. And also they contain bioactive peptides, which have anti-anxiety, neurological, cardiovascular, joint and digestive support. So this is, if you're going to use fish oil, this is probably the one that is probably worth trialing first because of its high quality. There's no solvents, it's just water and enzymes, and it's highly stable. That's the other thing to consider with fish oils, is it can go quite rancid. And then many people don't experience that fishy burp, so you don't have that with this extract. When it comes to sleep, there's a whole bunch of different options. There's magnesium, there's melatonin, there's valerian, lavender, and even I add now saffron. I've actually just published a study looking at saffron and its sleep-enhancing effects. And saffron has been a saffron extract for 30 days was shown to have positive effects on sleep. So these are good options to consider when it comes to sleep. And the other one is obviously, and this is just a selection that I've just listed here. There's a whole bunch of different options for people to consider, but other supplements to help improve immunity. So you have your andrographis, which is really important for influenza or respiratory type infections. So this ingredient can help improve our immune response. The research shows it helps with respiratory infections. It's a great antioxidant. It also has anti-diabetic properties. And quite interestingly, there's also research showing that it's neuroprotective. So it can actually protect our brain. There's some animal studies that are indicating that it not only has immune enhanced or immune modulating effects, it also can have neuroprotective effects. I'll list here also again echinacea. So we've got potentially the echinacea effect in terms of its anti-anxiety effect and its immune enhancing effects. There's nice research around elderberry, olive extracts, probiotics, and obviously nutrients like vitamin C. We need to make sure our vitamin D levels are optimized. Things like zinc are also really important from an immune perspective. And finally, obviously, this is where your omega-3s come into play again, which are anti-inflammatory chemicals, which are really important to consider. So finally, the things to consider then is come up with if you're struggling with anxiety, low mood, stress, then here's a checklist that you can print off or just create for yourself. And it's just a self-care checklist that makes you more accountable. Things that you can kind of consider on a daily basis that you need to do. Just a checklist. Have I engaged in exercise? Have I eaten a healthy and nutritious foods? Have I slept well? Did I not use electronic devices excessively? So I have all those things that I've listed in this webinar are in this list. You can add to them, you can modify it, you can create your own here. But this is just at the end of the day, helps you more accountable. The issue is it's great come out with ideas, but ultimately you need to implement these ideas. And this self-care checklist can help you in that area. So I'll just pass on to Sheriff.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lopresti. What a wonderful presentation. I learn something new every single time I hear you speak. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy way to speak to us all the way from Australia. Folks, I imagine some of you may have questions about the presentation, stress, mental health. Please feel free to contact us at terrytalksnutrition.com. We will make sure that we pass along any queries you have to Dr. Lopresti. Additionally, you can watch this video in addition to being on the Terry Talks Nutrition website. We also have a YouTube channel, also named Terry Talks Nutrition. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's presentation. Thank you again, Dr. Lopresti, for being with us. And until we all meet again, good health to you. Bye-bye.